Okay, we should be live right now. Good morning, everybody, and I do say good morning. Welcome to Talking TSR. My name is Chris, and over to my virtual left is Rick.
Hi,
And
folks.
We are coming at you on a DCC online weekend, which is a little bit different. So our time slot's a little bit different to accommodate the convention. We're glad. Actually, I myself am a morning person, so I'm digging this. I hope everybody's got their muffin and got their coffee, and everybody's interested in talking some TSR with us for the next hour or so. Rick, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing good, holding down. How you managing with the pandemic and everything going on right now?
I'm managing actually quite well. I as imagine most gaming introverts probably are. We've kind of been, this kind of is, in my opinion, it's kind of in our wheelhouse. Not a
Mhm.
big fan of crowds, even though I live in a very densely populated state. I myself and my family, we tend to avoid crowds at any part. Anyway, I'm not a big concert goer or whatnot. So hunkering down at home is not a bad thing. It's definitely wearing a little bit,
Mhm.
but I think we're okay. How are you doing with everything?
Good. So you come from a natural line of social distancers, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I really do. So, and I really don't mind social distancing from family and friends. I miss a little bit. Coworkers, definitely. I'm not missing that at all, to be honest with you. Working remotely is an absolute joy.
Yeah.
I do work in the field, and I've been out and about lately with the weather being nice, which isn't a bad thing. It is nice seeing the tri-state area starting to open up a little bit now and everything, and hopefully everybody's just responsible out there.
Yeah, I like to think that our particular hobby, at least people are very adaptable. Uh, it's not like playing racquetball or something or rock climbing where we can switch to electronic means if we have to. Um, and let's face it, I think every D&D group has at least one computer nerd in the group. So usually people can
Yeah.
work something out.
Definitely. So have you been doing online gaming during this crisis?
Yeah, we have taken the plunge in a minor way. I do have a regular group that I DM for, a really great group of veteran players, I'm happy to say. And we kind of did our first electronic session, which was very low. We didn't use fantasy grounds or something of that nature. We haven't quite taken that plunge yet, but we did Google Hangouts, and I used Photoshop with some layers so I could move little tokens around on a map, and it
Nice.
worked. I miss the face to face. I will say there is,
Mhm.
for me, whether it's playing board games or it's playing D&D, there is a joy about having people around the table, and that it can't be replaced by faces on a screen. But we made it work. I think for a session or two, that's going to be the reality, um,
Yeah.
and then get back to it. But yeah, I miss seeing my friends up close. So you know,
Yeah.
I'll be glad as we kind of transition back into normalcy. When it's safe to do so.
Yeah. No. Well, it's the same here. So I did my first for Cyclops Con. I actually did my first online game. I used Roll
Right?
20, learned it in about 5 or 6 days. Very intuitive, great setup and everything. It worked really well. Excellent for 5e because a lot of it's already programmed in there, the dice rolling mechanics and whatnot. And what was ironic was, it was the first time I ran a game, and I would say 4 out of my 5 players or 5 out of my 6 players, it was their first time too.
Wow.
So, this was back in April. So I imagine a lot more people have some sessions under their belt at this point. So, but yeah, and every Saturday night we get together virtually with our regular gaming group. We play some games. Played some Lords of Waterdeep last night.
Nice.
Yeah, so came in second place, unfortunately. But no, it's definitely it's not the same, but it's what we got, and
Yeah.
we make it work.
I think we
So
have similar tastes because I know we mentioned we were talking a little bit offline about board gaming, but that Lords of Waterdeep is one of our favorites for whatever reason. And for the first time, we played it on Steam, and I have certain app versions of programs like Ticket to Ride on the iPad, but I had never played with other people via Steam, so that was a new adventure for me as well. And it was actually pretty good. It was a
yeah,
fairly smooth, intuitive experience. As long as you remember to end your turn, it was good.
Ye Yes, there's a
Yeah,
lot of unnecessary end your turn clicking in
yeah,
Overlord
had to
for
like
some
click that little
reason, yeah.
green arrow, but
Yep,
it's kind of nice to have something keeping score for you. So
yeah,
I could
yeah,
get used to
no,
that, maybe. So
that's
yeah,
great.
gamers are adaptable. We work it out, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely, and, no, it's like I said, it's not the same, but, we're making do,
Yeah.
without a doubt, obviously, some not great news, last couple weeks, Gen Con getting canceled right on the heels of After Spiel getting canceled, not surprised, but it is still kinda like Christmas getting canceled. A lot of people, do kind of set their calendar based on that first week in August or very end of July, whenever it happens to fall. And we were thinking, here at Talking TSR, I don't know if many of the modern gamers remember, but there was a time when actually TSR owned Gen Con,
Mhm.
back in the day, and we were thinking that it might not be a bad idea to do kind of a Gen Con themed episode coming up. So I think we, instead of doing it for this episode, I think next episode, which is going to be in the middle of July, I think we will kind of do a Gen Con themed episode, talk about our first or some of our earlier Gen Cons that we went to. When was your first Gen Con, Rick?
I'm going to say 1987, I believe. I
Yeah,
was in Milwaukee. I can vouch that much for it.
yeah, and ironically, that was my first Gen Con as well. So apparently, two guys from New Jersey who didn't know each other back then,
Yeah.
who were going to eventually become associated through professional writing. We were apparently one of those 6,000 people that were there.
Yeah.
And it'll be
Somewhere in
nice to kind
the crowd.
of to go down and talk some of those old stories and everything. So looking forward to that.
Yeah, I think that'd be cool.
Great. All right, so we've got a couple of interesting things, kind of segment-wise, for everybody today. We are going to first, we're going to take a little bit of a dive into ore number one, original adventures reincarnated into the Borderlands. Excellent, thank you, sir. So we're going to actually talk a little bit about that. We just finished up. Um, the writing for Temple of Elemental Evil, Rick and myself. Yes, that was really good, a really nice milestone to cross to get over that
Big
finish
book.
line. Yes, yes, a very big book.
Really
I
big
think people
book.
are going to love it. People are going to love it.
Yeah.
So
Good.
we do want to talk about that in some upcoming episodes, but we also want to be able to show some stuff off, give some teasers in that, maybe some maps, maybe some artwork, and that stuff hasn't been created yet. So I think we're going to hold off on that. So we figured we'd kind of go back to the beginning and
Yep.
we kind of do a little bit of talking about B1 and B2 specifically, some of our experiences with that, and some of the some of the challenges that we faced when we converted that over to fifth edition. And then after that, in honor of DCC Online, we're going to do a top 5 list. But Rick and I have each put together a top 5 list of our favorite DCC modules back from the 3.0, 3.5 days. So that's the DCCs that got everything all started. That was predating the DCC RPG. So we're looking. That was a great this past week. That was a great march down memory lane, pulling
Mhm.
out 50 some odd modules and going through them and remembering them all and deciding, hey, yeah, these are the ones I think I
A
really
lot of
like
good
a lot.
books. A lot of good
Yeah,
books.
excellent. So all right, so I think we're
Yeah.
gonna jump right into it. Let's talk some Into the Borderlands.
Yeah.
So all right, Rick, take it away.
Sure. Well, let's start talking B1 first.
Okay.
In Search of the Unknown, because that it has a soft spot in my heart. It was the first module in which I ever went into as a player. First creature was a giant ant. I didn't realize that a single giant ant wasn't that formidable at the time. I think I pictured something like the movie Them. So, at the time, I
The
didn't
size of
know
a
much.
house.
Very new. Yeah, I was very new player. So I think I pictured a giant ant a little bigger, and so did my DM. But yeah, I have a soft spot for that one. I really like, maybe even more so than many people, I really like In Search of the Unknown. If nothing else, or the main reason, because it is the quintessential kind of example dungeon. I think Carr lays out a really good example dungeon that hits all the first edition marks. There is the classic first edition room maze of all doors. There are pit traps. There are slide traps. There's a portcullis trap. There are weird containers to open up and examine. There's several very creative rooms. I think there's a wizard laboratory that's got like a little bit of a funny bit in it with a cat. There's that great room with all the pools, with unusual contents. Um, I think it is a great example dungeon. It's not a stocked dungeon, obviously, but and we can talk about that, but I think as far as the room design and what it lays out for a beginning DM, it serves as a really good, solid adventure because the analogy I use is like there's a lot of TV shows and things that I like, and sometimes a good show, like a good Star Trek show, is not always a good example of a Star Trek show, if that makes
Mm,
sense. Like one of my
yeah.
favorite Star Trek shows is City on the Edge of Forever, which is, I think, a fantastic show, but it's not really a show I would show somebody if they hadn't seen Star Trek and say this is a good example of Star Trek because there's no ship-to-ship combat, there's no phasers, there's none of that classic stuff. Whereas In Search of the Unknown is a good classic example of a first edition dungeon, I think. I think it serves as a good sample. But what do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I would agree. I mean, it's there's definitely some weird rooms in there. Definitely off the wall. I did shortly after I did the fifth edition conversion, I had the pleasure of running my son through it, and it was his first time I've run him in a D&D game, and it was a little bit strange. He'd been playing D&D for a while,
Mhm.
and so but he cut his teeth on the modern games and whatnot. So there it was a lot of weirdness, I would say.
Mhm.
Just not standard corridors exactly, and like you said, all the different types of rooms. But I agree. I think I think it is a fabulous map framework. They gave a little bit of backstory there to kind of whet your appetite and kind of get you there. And then that was it. Yeah, I think we should probably discuss about the fact that it wasn't fully done, and what people think about it. And ironically, last night during our seminar, How to Rate Adventures That Don't Suck, we actually started talking about B1 and the fact that
There
it,
you
it,
go.
it did not come stocked with monsters and treasures. It was a map, it was an outline, it was a description of the room. Most of them had read aloud text. I think they had read aloud text. No, actually, they might
I,
not have had read aloud text.
yeah, I don't
Yeah,
know.
but there was the room description, and it kind of gave you everything you needed. But they didn't actually put the encounters and finish the encounters or the treasure. Gave you some wonderful tables. If there's one thing I've learned about Gary Gygax, he loves his tables and his subtables, and subtables of subtables. And so it was all the tools were there, and it was included in the 32-page module, so you didn't actually have to have the other rule books at that point. You had your list of monsters, you had your statistics, you had all the tools
Yeah.
to do it. It's just it wasn't done, and in my opinion, so this is might be where we're gonna disagree on this,
Mhm.
is I actually kind of felt cheated. I remember I had purchased many other modules before B1. The first box set that I got had B2 in it, so obviously I cut my teeth on B2. But I would probably say it was 2 or 3 years, probably at least, before I picked up a copy of B1.
Mm.
And I remember opening it up and being very disappointed.
Mhm.
I
I can
felt
see
like
that.
it
I can
wasn't
see that.
finished. Yeah, that $6 that I spent back then was a huge amount of money. And I felt like, why am I going to spend money to get something that's not complete? And I remember I own almost everything, every module that I've had from back in the day. However, a few years after, I actually sold my original copy of B1 because
Uh,
I felt like it was
wow.
it was a beginning game master. He hadn't done his own adventure before, and I was like, oh, I got something for you.
Mhm.
Sold it to him for like $2 or
Wow.
whatever. Got some of my money back, and probably turned around and bought another module with it that was complete.
Funny.
And I was not a huge fan of it, and so I don't know. So how do you feel about that? Because people definitely sit on different
Yeah.
sides of the fence there.
Well, I definitely think whether if it was your first module you purchased as opposed to, your second or third, I think definitely that would color your opinion. Given the hindsight of time, coming at it from a current perspective now, I think it definitely would have been better served. It's a two-level dungeon. I think it would have been better served if they would have stocked the upper level or half of the upper
Hmm.
level
Yeah,
and then
great point.
left the cave level unpopulated for the DM to
Mm,
do. Because then at least it would have, because even myself as a new DM using that book as my first book, I do remember I would have been better served with some solid examples of tactics or how creatures are in there, because the creature placements, because of the creatures they give you, are sort of random. I feel like anyway, like rats here, kobolds here, orcs here. Um, so yeah, I think some solid examples would go a long way. Not to move into B2 yet, but I know in B2 they lay out a lot. There's a lot more hand holding. There's a point where they take an area they keep and they say, well, we're going to tell you sort of what should belong in this room, and here are some things that should be in this room, but we're going to let you do it. And they kind of lay it out a little more for the DM. So yeah, I think more examples, more population, maybe not populate the whole thing, but I think definitely at least half of it should have been populated. I agree with that.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
That's really that was the tactic they really took with before the Lost City. If you recall that
oh,
the
you're right,
upper
right.
part of the pyramid was completely fleshed out, completely designed, read aloud text, tactics, monsters, stats, and then you got to the lower part of the pyramid, and you just had a room number, a map, and here's the monster, here's the treasure, and one or two things had a couple more details and everything, and then to take it even a step further, then you got down to the Lost City, and you had about a quarter of a page of the Lost City description, and then you just had, oh, and here's some catacombs here and everything, and just a sentence or two, if you will. So yeah, I think they might have pulled that off a little bit better in B4, in giving that example, for you giving that a little bit more of that example. They give you 50 some odd detailed rooms, and then 50 some odd rooms or 40 some odd rooms that pretty much leave to your own design, but kind of heads you into that direction,
Mhm.
if you wanted to go in that direction. So I agree with you. I think that might have been a better tactic to go. But the fact of the matter is, they didn't know back then, because this was all brand new.
Yeah,
They didn't know what was going to work, what was going to work. I guess my one comment would be is we never got another module like B1 that wasn't stocked before.
right.
So I can assume possibly that it wasn't well received,
Yeah,
or just that people were like, well, no, I'm going to do my own thing anyway, and or just give me something. Or maybe there was more people like me out there that just felt like they didn't get their money's worth out of everything. Because I'm telling you, I mean, back in the early '80s, $6 was that was a
that
lot. I
was
know
yeah.
$6 now doesn't get you a meal number three at McDonald's, but
No, that barely gets you a cup of coffee at Starbucks.
yeah, oh
But
yeah, good lord, yeah, Starbucks, just
um,
go down
and
that
I
road.
just,
So.
it's funny. I just thought of an Easter egg related to B1 that some people may not know about. Back in the classic products, if you look at the upper level map of B1, which is all the quarters and the maze and the fountain, the pool room and what have you, that entire map is actually inserted in part of Waterdeep, the or what no,
Oh,
what is it? Undermountain.
wow, okay, I
So
did not know that.
if you look at a copy of the original Undermountain, Forgotten Realms Undermountain,
Mhm.
and I believe it's the level 1 map, but don't hold me to it because I'm going by memory here. But if you look at that map, or if you look online, I'm sure somebody's got it online for that map, you will actually see the entire first level of B1 is inserted as part of the Undermountain map.
Oh,
So
that's fascinating. I gotta check
yeah,
that
so
out.
Wizards actually published it, and I don't, Undermountain's kind of been redone a little bit since then, so I don't know if it's come out in any subsequent, editions or versions or anything like that, or books that have touched on Undermountain. But I know in the very original boxed Undermountain set, the first
Hmm.
box set, if you pull out those big poster maps and you look, you will see the map for B1 in
Oh,
part
all
of
right.
that map, and I
Guess
recognized it immediately because it's very iconic to me, and
yeah,
I always wondered how many people caught that. So there's a
yeah.
little reference there. Greenwood or
Good.
somebody wanted to put in a little nod to B1.
Oh, that's great. So I like that. Shout out, good morning to everybody watching us. Chat in the comments. If you guys have questions, feel free, hit us up with some questions while we're talking here. We'll get to it. If you
Yes,
guys have any content that you want to see us cover, any topics you want us to see us cover, definitely go on, and we jump
yeah,
back into it. So let's talk a little bit about the fact that that B2 and probably more B2, but certainly a little bit B1. The fact that it's really kind of a sandbox setting, and we
mhm,
use that term a lot. I'm assuming most folks know what sandbox means. You know, and which is fascinating because I think again back in the day, back when we're talking when these first came out, late 70s, early 80s, you know, there was not a, you know, right now, I mean, they've been designing adventures for 40 years. Everybody thinks they kind of got it down now. They know what the
Mhm.
format is, but back then there really wasn't the format, you
No.
know, and you know, it was B2 was you know, it's how I cut my teeth. You know, you had the keep, which was your setting, your town setting, if you will. You had some wilderness encounters, four of them, I believe.
Yeah.
And then you had, you know, some other locations on the map. And then that was basically, it was like, here you go. And here's a
Mhm.
rumor table. God, used to love those rumor tables. And that was it. It was go do what you want to do. You know, you don't have to go. We're gonna, you know, obviously you want to get them to the caves of chaos, but yeah, it was the sandbox always fascinated me. It always
Mhm.
got, yeah, I was always inspired by the sandbox nature of modules of just where you could go and take it. Then it's like they gave you kind of the skeleton, the framework of it, but then taking that to the next level.
Yeah.
um
Especially that wilderness map, because that, I
yeah,
mean, without even touching the obvious cave of the unknown, just the scope of the map, and like you said, the fact that they only give you, you know, a couple little, like, here's a little encounter on the marsh, here's this, it begs to be expanded. Uh, I remember as a young DM looking at that and wanting to immediately populate it with other things.
yeah,
And I like the rumor tables. I know some people might
yeah,
think they're cheesy, but I love rumor tables because that too inspired me. Reading some of those rumors would make me formulate ideas for other encounters, or even red
interesting.
herrings. So
Yeah,
yeah, I love that stuff. And I
yeah.
love sandbox modules. Period. I some of those, that to me is one of the first. I guess the first sandbox. I guess you could say. Uh,
Yeah, I think it really was. Yeah, I think it definitely and it definitely made you think a little bit outside of the dungeon
mhm,
and talked to, and you know, maybe considered more the journey to and from the dungeon. And you know, now the, you know, hex crawls are kind of a thing and everything, but that was really kind of your first
yeah,
hex crawl, and I don't even think it was hexagons if I'm not mistaken.
yeah.
So yeah, I love that, and I think you really saw when we did Or One into the Borderlands. We saw a real opportunity when we were doing both modules together, that we could really take it a next level, make it sandboxy. You know, by basically, you know, it was never explicitly stated that B1 and B2 happened, or, you know, occurred next to each other. But you
Mhm,
look at the map where it said Cave of the Unknown, and in the description of the fortress, you were like, that looks like the Cave of the Unknown is B1. It looks like it, but you know, it didn't actually say that. And I think Gygax was great about that. Like he didn't, you know, he didn't etch things in stone. He was like, if
mhm,
you want this to be B1, have it
yeah,
be B1. If you want that to be your own dungeon, because I believe he put explicit instructions in there about the Cave of the Unknown, that's yours. It's like, look at
mm,
what we did with the Caves of Chaos, and make it whatever you want to make it. So
mhm,
that part was fascinating, and I think you know, it was a pleasure and very very um uh losing the words here, very very therapeutic to actually take some of those wilderness encounters and expand on them and make them a little bit more important in the sandbox,
mhm,
and kind of bring everything kind of together. And that's what we did. And you know, we kind of kept it, we kind of made an assumption when we put that product together that we were going to have the Cave of the Unknown be one.
mhm,
But you know, you certainly could move it and put it certain else. And later on we actually published fifth edition fantasy number 16, the Cave of the Unknown, so that if you wanted a whole separate dungeon, you could have that. And then to take that sandbox a little bit further, we even when we published FEF 14, Beneath the Keep, gave you another opportunity. That was an adventure that actually happened when you were still in the keep, before you even got out of the keep. So you know, I see those opportunities to really make the product more useful.
mhm.
Not only do you have this product B1, B2, but now you've got some supporting material that you can kind of also put in that same sandboxy wilderness. So that was very much what we were thinking when we designed it. So
Mhm. Yeah, there's really the basis there for everything a DM needs in a way. You've got local dungeons, you've got a terrific base of operations in the keep, you've got a potential for kind of some political intrigue around the keep or NPC interactions. There's plenty of sandbox elements for the DM to explore. I think that's one of the original's strengths, and then that was expanded in the ore product was the fact that it is such a for the length of it, it really provides a lot for the DM. There's a lot of elements there. It's a great whole package, I guess, because you get the keep and you get the caves and you get a wilderness map and some wilderness encounters to start you off. So there's really a lot there. Um, I think the average beginning DM back then could get a lot, and that I guess is one of its strengths. In Search of the Unknown was kind of a couple sessions and you were done. Where I think B2, there's definitely growth there. There's
Yeah.
or room to expand, I should say.
Yep.
Um, and yeah, I definitely and having said all I said about B1, I also like B2. I think given the sheer amount of humanoids in the caves, obviously that could have really been very redundant. And I think there was some effort made both to make some encounters very creative. I love the little orc or kobold or whoever it was that stuck his head on the shelf with all the other skulls and was kind of spying in the one area. I love the bugbear encounter where you first walk into the bugbear caves and they try to spear you with these shish kebabs they're holding after kind of duping you, thinking they're friendly. Uh, there was some effort there made, happily to make the different humanoids behave a little different. And I like that because, you did have, or at least I did, a different feel when you go from kobolds to bugbears or what have you. So I think that was a fun part of the module. Though personally, I like the weirder caves better. I like the little, the little cultist area. I love that. I love the little. There was a little section of cave with an owlbear and some oozes and things, and I think that appealed to my younger self better. But yeah,
Yeah.
it was good. It was a really solid product that and I love the fact that you guys expanded with the Cave of the Unknown the way you did, because I always made that assumption. For me, I don't remember ever having my players on that map go to the Cave of the Unknown, but I know we ran B1 and B2 in succession or quick succession, and I assumed that there was a connection between
Yeah.
the two. So
And I think many people did, and then we even took it a step further. So when we were able to create the additional material for B2, I created another humanoid layer. I kind of kept that theme that you talked about, a different set of humanoids, Zvarts, from the Fiend
mhm.
Folio. I designed a cave on that. I did have fun with another cave of just cool stuff in it, like kind of like you're saying, the owlbear cave with the oozes and that. So I had a little bit of fun with that. And then the last little section that we added actually was a long route that went in that basically went from B2 back to B1, so that if you wanted them linked together, you could actually make a direct link in it. It was basically like an almost like a little Underdark route and everything like that.
Yeah.
So that was the direction where we went to expand the material, and I think um, that's the beauty of it, the fact that we were really um, looking at such a short word count slash number of pages and how much content you had right there. Phenomenal. And hold on, I'm getting a text from the boss as we speak. I think we might be having some technical difficulties here. Okay. All right. So we're gonna keep going.
All
So
right.
all right. So yeah. So any other final thoughts on B1, B2?
Um, I guess I just I mean, obviously they're a product of their time, but I like the purity of them. I like the fact that they're very exploration based. I like the fact that they're just great. Both of them are great examples for new DMs in different ways.
Yeah. And that's why one of the reasons why we picked that as the very first one of the original adventures reincarnated.
Definitely.
It's very approachable. It definitely needed an upgrade for the modern
Mhm.
gamer. And we did that, but extremely it's modules back then 40 years ago were a little bit simpler. They were a little bit more streamlined. They were a little bit more get right to the action kind of situation. And that's fine, because right now um, you and I, who cut our teeth on these, we now have young kids.
Hmm.
and no time. Like I always say, back in the
No
day,
time.
back in the day that $6 was huge.
Yeah.
This day, right now, $50 is not so huge, but I don't have any time. I
All
had
right.
time back
Yep.
then and no money. Now I have no
Yep.
time and plenty of money. So there's definitely a place for something like that, upgraded for the modern gamer to use. And I get so many stories working at conventions about how they ran through B1 or B2, and now they're bringing their kids through it, or their kids
Hmm.
and their kids'
Yeah.
friends, and they're 10 years
Yeah.
old, 11 years old, and having an absolute blast, and
Mhm.
having a blast with the new rule set. And that's what's phenomenal in
Yeah.
my opinion, kind of it coming full circle like
The
that.
circle
um,
continues. Yeah.
it does. And then even the younger gamers, like, my son, who's now 17, but he's been role playing now for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Back when he was like 15 and he was his own game master and all that, he figured out how to do these things off of some of these modules. So it's been phenomenal. So, and I agree. Definitely a different feel. Exploration was a huge part back then. You can make the argument that that's basically the basis of B1 is exploring. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the
It
number
is.
one
It is.
goal, is to
Yeah.
just go and explore.
Yeah.
So, great, excellent. So, all right, that was good. So I hope everybody enjoyed our little diving into B1, B2, and into the Borderlands there. I'm guessing next episode we're probably going to do a dive into Isle of Dread.
Yeah.
So we'll have
I
a
would
good
like
time
that.
with that. But I think we should probably get on to our top five list, because I think that's probably what a lot of people are here for.
Yeah. Let's get into that. Let's do
Yeah.
it.
So, all right, Rick, why don't you start us off with five?
Gonna
Couple
start.
of things. Couple of things are off the bat. So these are
Yeah.
all 3.0, 3.5 DCC original adventures. This is
Yep.
before the DCC RPG. Now I made a rule of my own that I was not going to pick any of my modules. So that eliminates modules DCC number 0, 7, 11, 13, 15, 49, 51, and 51.5. You'll notice there's a pretty big gap between 15 and 49. And that's because I was working on 51, which was Castle White Rock, and
There
took
you go.
literally years to do. So I am not going to be doing any of those. I also decided, not that I didn't think it was a good module, that I did not pick Rick's module also. But I'm, outside of that, Rick and I didn't lay down any other rules,
Yeah.
except it's got to be the modules between 0 and 52.
Right. We've
And
not communicated our list to each other as
We have
usual.
not. So we're going to be just as surprised as everybody
Yeah.
else. So,
That's our plan with these lists, right? We're just gonna
yep.
throw them, and I follow the same thing. None of my own books are in there. I did not include box sets or compilations or even the tournament modules, though I really like some of the tournament modules because I participated in most of them. But I had a hand in writing a lot of those, so I did not include those. Um,
Okay.
so anyway,
So
yeah. All right.
let's get to
So
it.
getting
Why
to
don't you
my
jump
list.
in number 5?
All right, let's jump in with number 5. I'm going to present Airy of the Crow God. And,
Nice.
and I don't know how to pronounce the author's last name, by either Andrew Hind or Hind. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. But anyway, this was one of the first DCCs I really looked into deeply because it is DCC number 5. And I liked it. I thought it presented an interesting, the setting was interesting because you're kind of climbing up to this airy, and you've got this elevated lighthouse type structure and harpies, and this hanging over the ocean kind of environment. So I thought that was really cool. And then there's a second half to the module where then there's an actual temple setting that's very different. So I thought it was nice juxtaposition of settings. I thought it was a well-written book with some cool encounters. Andrew has a good tendency to take certain creatures like skeletons and just give them a little tweak. So there's an encounter where you run into some skeletons kind of spring out of a secret door and ambush you as you're going up the spiral stairs. And because these skeletons were formerly expert, I think, crossbowmen or archers in life, they still retain that ability to hit well with missile weapons. So that was kind of a little tweak to their classic skeleton stats. So I thought that was creative. So yes, my number 5, Airy of the Crow God.
Excellent. Number 5. That's a great choice. I do remember that module being one of the very, very early ones. I do remember the Sea Spire setting, and I love that. I love the fact that you get those two different flavors of settings, if you will, environments. Very important. That's one of the things that cave after cave after cave does sometimes get boring after a while, but mixing it up and having finished chambers versus natural chambers sometimes
Oh
is
yeah.
a great way to go. Excellent way to go. All right. So my number 5 is DCC number 50. All
Mm.
right, and that is Vault of the Iron Overlord,
Uh,
written by Monte Cook. Now, come on, you can't go wrong with Monte Cook. He wrote the rules to the game. He rewrote the rules, but
yes,
he
and I
was
hope
very
you'll show
very
them.
heavily involved in the third edition of the game. This was, if for those of you who are not aware of DCC number 50, and I guess we should also mention that all of these DCCs are available in the online store for download. So if you don't have the Dead Tree copies of these modules like we do, and any of these pick your interest, just zip on
Yep,
over to Goodman
check
Games
them
and
out.
you can grab these. Yeah. So
Yep.
this was the famous module number 50 that had the spinning map. And I'm gonna see if I can get this up here and kind of show it to people. But as you can see, this is actually the actual dungeon.
Yeah.
Actually map spins around, and you've got the doors. I think there's 8 or 12 different sections or whatever that the doors could line
And
up
the
to.
smaller rings, there you go. The smaller
Yep.
rings spin independently too. It's like
Yeah.
concentric rings. So
So
it's
there's like 3
cool.
levels, and I hear, I don't know all the details. This is something that other folks probably know, but DCC number 100, which is coming out very soon or at some point, is going to have another spin design map like this. But apparently, it's much more complicated.
Mm.
I think this is pretty complicated in the first place, but
Oh yeah.
for no other reason, Monte Cook and a spinning map that works with a great backstory, and that's a recipe for greatness, to be honest with you, and definitely worthy of 50. I remember when we were first talking about Castle White Rock, which was number 51, we were talking that being number 50. And then I
Mm.
remember Joe saying, "Oh no," I was like, "We got some other ideas for number 50." And I was bummed until I saw this and saw the spinning
Yeah.
map. And I said, "Oh, I get," I was like, Monte Cook and a spinning map. Okay, yeah, I get it. It's like I totally, but there was some great encounters. First of all, the backstory was shortish but good, solid. The actual dungeon itself with the spinning of the map, the dungeon was an adversary that you had to overcome, basically the entire dungeon, because that was a big part of it. You had to figure out how the spinning happened so that you could actually negotiate through the dungeon. It was great. The big bad, the boss battle, who's on the cover here, like the furnace golem, like the Iron Overlord, was actually kind of like a Russian nesting doll. And once you killed one, it's like another one popped out, and you had to do that like 3 times. So that was I thought that was great. Like that was like, oh wow, you actually do the boss fight basically 3 times. Phenomenal, and just some of the individual encounters were just well designed. There was an energy floor with iron bars all over, and there was grillons, and they were obviously really good at swinging from bar to bar, but the PCs weren't. But you touch the floor, you get shocked, and everything. It was great. Really, very tournament-esque feel to that module. That module would probably make a phenomenal tournament.
Mhm.
Probably could easily convert that
I can see
into
that.
probably a 2 or
Yeah.
even a 3 round tournament. So
Yeah.
loved it. So that's my number 5.
Yeah, that's a good pick. That didn't make my list, but it came very close because and I definitely remember first opening that cover and looking at that
Yeah.
map and being like, "Oh, he pulled it off." Kind
Yeah.
of
And
my
how
first
is it
thought.
even attached in there? It's like
Yeah,
I still don't understand it.
I
There's a
know.
pin in
I
there somewhere, but
I
I'm like,
still
yeah,
expect to see, a little brass thing sticking out of the front cover, and it's not.
yeah,
So, yeah, kudos to Joe Goodman for pulling that off because
yeah.
that the printer must have had fun with that one because
Oh, I imagine. You want to
uh,
do what?
yeah, exactly. Like, explain that to me again. I don't
Yeah.
want to know how many proofs they had to go through on that one. All right, jumping into my number 4, I'm going with Talons of the Horned King by
Nice.
Mike Ferguson. Mike Ferguson, first off, is just a great writer. I think he's
Prolific also.
yes, he's the kind of writer, honestly, and I've worked with Mike, so truth in advertising, and I picked the module because it's good, not because I like Mike, but he's prolific, he's a fast writer, and he's a good writer. So he gets that trifecta that I think every writer is kind of jealous of a little bit.
Yeah, and
Um,
every publisher loves.
yeah, like I'm not a fast writer, and I'll be the first to admit that. I like to think I'm at least a good writer, but I'm not a fast writer. So it's yeah, I'm jealous. But Talons of the Horn King is super creative. It comes off to me as a love letter to Expedition of the Barrier Peaks. It's got that whole futuristic vibe, clockwork vibe going on in it. And, I should note, I'm not usually about that. I'm usually not a peanut butter my chocolate kind of guy. That usually in my campaigns, I like the traditional. I don't want gunpowder. I don't want gnomes on trains. I don't want technological laser beams and all this kind of clockworky stuff. That's usually not what I'm about, and my players know that. And yet, this module was done very well. And anybody who knows Expedition of the Barrier Peaks, there's like, let me hold up, there is some kind of tables that go
Yep.
into exploring the items. There is breakdown, there we go, there's breakdown of some of the technological kind of items you find. And there's also just really cool encounters riffing on that. It's not just we're going to throw laser beams at you, but it's more the way he incorporates the technology with classic creatures. And just looking at the cover, um I mean, if that encounter doesn't inspire you, I don't know what does. So yeah, that is my number 4 pick.
Oh, great. So,
Hounds of the
all
Horn
right. So
King, Mike
we do
Ferguson.
have some chat. I did forget to mention, and it was on my list. I forgot to mention it, but yes, Errol Otis
Oh
cover
yeah,
artwork. Yeah,
yeah.
that is not to be be underestimated
No,
as well. It's all
not at
part of the
all.
complete package. So thanks for the shout out there, guys.
Yeah,
All right,
love
my number
Errol.
4. Yeah, this one
Errol.
this might be a little bit interesting here. My number 4. So I went with DCC number 30,
Mhm.
Vault of the Dragon King.
Oh,
Now,
that was.
this was our second annual tournament.
Mhm.
I was the tournament organizer, but I did not do any writing on this or anything. I did actually review it. I think I probably gave Jason Little was the author there. And for those of you in the industry, Jason Little went on to some great things. I mean, he did some Warhammer stuff for Fantasy Flight. He did the X-wing board game, and he's got just a great guy, enthusiastic, passionate is what I'd say. And this was the labor of love for him. A huge thick
Yeah,
module.
yeah.
A little bit different than your standard module because it was designed as a tournament module. It's got a lot less encounters. Something that we were talking about with B1, B2, how you had all that content, all those encounters in such a short number of pages. This was kind of the opposite. I believe there was 30 encounters, and this sucker is 128 pages. And again, it's probably not the best thing to run for a campaign, but you know what? For a tournament, this did it all.
Yeah.
The encounters in here were amazing, and a lot of that's because Jason was part of Crypt of the Devil Lich for the first year, so he designed several of the encounters so he saw that tournament from the origin on how we wanted to do it. And then he took that and did it for an entire 3-round tournament himself, and crafted a wonderful backstory with the whole Dragon Kings. And ironically, spoiler alert: the Dragon Kings are not dragons; they're actually giants. And all of the dungeons were giant size. There were these titans that were like 25 feet tall. So your corridors are massive, which really gave a lot of room to maneuver and do tactics, but a lot of room to also hurt yourself and get yourself into some serious trouble. And a great boss battle with a corrupted silver dragon. I mean, a silver dragon, which is a good, a good aligned adversary that was twisted and corrupted. And that's the bad guy, and that was great. And again, some of the encounters, some of the NPCs in there doing some great things with templates, and giving character classes of things, phenomenal. I cannot say enough about this. I'm seeing it on the chat too. Again, I missed it on the
Yeah,
chat too.
yeah, Errol.
Errol Otis
Another
again,
Errol Otis.
again. Can we
Yeah.
just have him do every artwork? I
Yes,
mean,
please.
seriously. I mean, that's my number 4. Vault of
Nice.
the Dragon Kings, number 30.
Solid pick. Solid pick. All right, number 3. And I don't think this book got the love maybe it deserved, but Revenge of the Rat King by Harley Stroh. Talk about prolific. Harley
Yeah,
is super prolific, super fun writer, super fun guy.
we should do a
And
top 5 Harley Strode
I
list
know
at some
we could
point.
do that just, yeah,
Easily.
because he's
Top
just
10,
enough to
top
pick from.
15.
But somehow Harley churns it out and manages to keep the quality up. And this was actually a follow-up module to a very early module with the Rat King. And in this module, the Rat King kind of comes back for revenge. But the beauty of this module, um, and it almost reads like a lower level module than it is. It's level 4 to 6, and yet it's I could see this easily being able, you could adapt this to a lower level and use it wonderfully. Is it almost uses a sort of 3-stage act, in that the first stage, the characters are lured into a very traditional dungeon setting by this Rat King who wants to get revenge. And then it's got a kind of classic knock out the characters and take away their equipment type setup that starts the second round. So the second round is pure survival, and it's got a lot of great encounters. The characters are picking up, makeshift weapons and using bits of chain as, flails. And there's a room with a whirlpool where they have to make all these desperate, swimming checks, or they're going to get pulled in this, whirlwind that's dragging them under the water. And then it sets them up for the third act, where then they can assault this underground lair of the Rat King and then take him by surprise and kind of get their revenge. And I've seen this multiple acts sort of uh, writing style of Harley's before in some of his books. And I also want to note, like, just his maps. Harley just makes these. He just designs these kind of gorgeous maps. They have this sort of
Classic.
circular kind of
Yeah.
rhythm to them. I can't explain it, but a lot of his maps, they sort of turn on themselves, and they have almost like a concentric style to them that's gorgeous. I don't know what it is, but I think the man, it sounds stupid, but I think the man designs a really, nice map. So yeah, that is my pick for a solid number 3, Revenge of the
All
Rat
right.
King by Harley
Into the
Strode.
Rat King. All right. I have a feeling Master Stroh's going to show up again on this list at some point. So,
Yeah.
all right. So I noticed I had a theme earlier with when I was putting my list together, but apparently I have another theme that I just stumbled upon right now. So my number 3 favorite DCC module with Errol Otis cover art is number 10, The Sunless Garden.
Brendan.
My original theme was so far I have number 50, number 40, and number 10. I seem to be going in whole, round numbers here. So
Mhm.
but this one is by Brendan LaSalle. First of all, I'm sure everybody who listens to it knows who Brendan is. If you have never had Brendan for a game master, you are
Oh,
doing yourself a
yes,
disservice. Okay,
yes.
you've got to have that man run you through whatever. It doesn't matter what he runs you through,
Yeah,
even if it's not and it's something that's publishable or whatever. It doesn't matter. He is an amazing game master.
yeah.
And this was just a phenomenal module. I love forest settings, and this one really struck a chord. Very simple, straightforward module. Meteor crashes, corrupts a treant druid back in the third edition days where you could throw classes on everything. So that was phenomenal. And it corrupts the treant. Treant turns evil, and he's your big bad. Love that concept right there. And then the actual Sunless Garden, a great example of of two different types of dungeon. You had this twisted, weird, plant monster infested cave
Mhm.
system, and then you kind of had your classic dungeon after that with bugbears and whatnot, and then you get to the workshop and you get the showdown with the treant. I love that because it was weird, it was kind of alien, kind of fit the whole meteorite thing.
Yeah.
Phenomenal. And so mutated plants, exploding apples. I love it. Apple grenades. I mean, that was just phenomenal. I remember the apple grenades like yesterday. Loved it. Just a classic. So that is my number 3, DCC number 10, The Sunless Garden. More
And
to
I
come.
can only echo what he said about Brendan as a dungeon master. If that man could put his energy in little dungeon master pills and sell them at conventions, I
Oh,
think he could retire early.
probably.
All right, number 2. Now, I haven't named any of my books, but I did name one of yours, not to flatter my co-host, but I think it's a great book. Secret of the Smuggler's Cove
Oh, okay.
by Chris Doyle, an oldie but a very goodie. Um, I really like this. I don't know why I tend to like these kind of swashbuckly kind of adventures. This one, and you can tell me since you're here, this one to me, it definitely had that salt marsh vibe going on. I felt like because you had a manor house, you had, smugglers down in the caves. It really struck me as like this guy. When I read this, I thought, boy, this guy must have liked salt marsh. Um,
Number one on my top 10 list.
yeah. So, I loved it for that influence. Um, I like the setup of some of the encounters, the way physical obstacles or physical challenges are used. And first and foremost, actually, I really just like the opponents. I think there's some good, creative, and hard opponents in here that a DM could really make use of. There's a succubus that comes on earlier. There is I'm going to screw up his classes, I'm sure, because I'm going by memory, but there's like a gnome wizard thief or wizard
Oh,
rogue or something along those that he can mess with you. And then there's the former captain of the smugglers is being held prisoner by the other smugglers, and he's in this hanging cage, and you are very likely to release him from this cage, and maybe you can work with him, maybe you can't, maybe he will turn on you, he probably will turn on you. And I think there's just a lot of, role playing opportunity there, and a good, villain there, possibly, or even returning character, returning villain in that former smuggler captain. So I really like that element. So yeah, you, one of your books is actually my number two, The Secret of Smuggler's Cove
oh,
by Chris Doyle.
thank you.
My number two.
Yes, definitely inspired by Saltmarsh, without a doubt.
Well,
So,
there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever.
all right, my number two. I don't believe this has Errol Otis artwork on it. I'm going all the way back to DCC number one,
Wow.
Idols of the Rat King. This is the one that started it all.
There we go.
Yeah, and I think that's probably why I mean, it was solid module and everything, but let's face it, um, this is the one that started it all,
And that's
and
part
this
one.
had to be. Yep, and that's
So,
part one. The Revenge
yeah.
of the Rat King was the sequel that I actually think I have. I have that Revenge of the Rat King right
Yeah, so
there.
we've got the 2
Um,
parts.
so, but this really, it created the product line,
Mhm.
and it just knocked it out of the park. Jeffrey Quinn was what was the author. First of all, the title, Idols of the Rat King. I remember when I first saw that, I was like, what's an idol? I have no idea. I'm like, got to look it up. That's a Gygaxian term right there. So that was the
Yeah.
first thing. Second thing, the blue maps. I think they were
Mhm.
purple, I think, in the original printing, I believe, but the blue maps, classic.
Yeah.
Nothing really exciting on those maps. There were mines. It was a low level module. It just hit all of the tropes.
Mhm.
Here's a great example right here. 32-page module, 42 encounters. Okay, for modern gamers, that's a lot of encounters
Oh,
in a
yeah.
relatively short page count.
Yeah.
Remember, Vault of the Dragon Kings, 128 pages, 30 encounters, and a little bit different because it was
Mhm.
tournament and everything, higher level, but compelling history and backstory,
Mhm.
not too much, but enough to kind of set the stage and everything. Great, again, great NPCs. I think that's what we always remember about these. I look back at these modules, a lot of times it's the NPCs. Um, Narzi Hillspec, just and then again, the succubi encounter from DCC number 7 was almost directly inspired by the sorceress vampire encounter in this module, which you're like first level, and there's like a vampire that you can release, and then all sorts of trouble, all sorts of heck breaks loose after that. So I think really it laid the groundwork for a lot of things to come.
Mhm.
There was a rewards section at the end, which I just ran with. I love that. A rewards for not just killing and taking treasure, and not taking treasures in third edition, but not for defeating monsters. But if you do certain things, if you complete certain tasks and objectives, if you will, you're going to get experience points. And it's like, that's great. I love that. And I made sure in every DCC module I put after that,
Mhm.
I've always included that in there. So really, to set the stage for the whole product line, knocked it out of the park, and really kind of had to, in my opinion. And maybe if Idols of the Rat King wasn't so classic, maybe we're not even doing this countdown right now, and maybe there isn't even a DCC RPG. I don't know. Maybe that's
Mhm.
reading a little bit too much into it, but you have to admit, you had to start somewhere, and it had to do it right, and it had to check all the boxes, and it certainly did. So that was my number 2, DCC number 1.
Nice. And I feel cheated because I actually don't own that copy, a copy. So I'm gonna have to get my hands on one because it's one of the few missing copies. I have nearly every of the DCCs. So I can't even, couldn't put it on my list because couldn't go back and reread it because I don't have a physical copy. So that's no good. So that's your pick. All
Yep.
right. Mine, and again, Harley's getting a lot of press here, I guess. Legacy of the Savage Kings by
Nice.
Harley Stroh. And again, this is a book that I think got a compelling backstory. It's an interesting premise. It almost sounds too complicated because when you first kind of look at the backstory of this, there is a situation where there's a swamp and it's blighted, and there were Savage King kind of barbarians that lived there at one point, and they were wiped out, but their ruins are still there. And there is a kind of witch queen who is making weapons using the blighted material from the swamps, and there's monsters in the swamps, and you look at it and you say, oh my god, there's so much going on in this module, because you've got an evil kind of witch queen, you've got lizard men running around, you've got a demon that's involved, you've got barbarian tombs, and yet somehow Harley gets it all to work. And again, he sort of does that classic almost 3-act structure with this module, where the first kind of section of the module, you're assaulting this rough fortress, this swamp fortress of this queen, this evil foe. So you're attacking her, and it's got this fortress full of kobolds, and that's all going on. And then you shift to the second part, which takes place more in the swamp, and there's some interesting swamp encounters, and then that launches you into a lizard man lair, which is a totally different feel from the fortress. So you have more of a classic lizard man lair with giant alligators and that kind of stuff, and that Danger and Dunwater kind of feel to it. And then you move through that section after dealing with these hostile lizard men who have been influenced by this demon tomb. And then you go into the actual Savage Kings, where now you're exploring these barbarian kind of tombs, and it gets a little more quiet, a little more puzzly, and you're more into a crypt environment. And you basically go from one section to another section to another section, and all 3 of the sections are completely different, and yet they all dovetail nicely into each other. The story leads you nicely from one to the other. So yeah, I thought this module was a whole lot of fun. Tons of different environments. It's like getting 3 modules in one. So that is my number 1 pick, Legacy of the Savage Kings by Harley
Great.
Stroh.
Excellent.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to hold my comments on that
Book.
so I can reveal my number 1.
There you go.
Because that's what my number 1 is.
Oh,
Check that out. I told you Master Stroh was going to appear on
that's
on my list
hysterical.
at some point.
That's hysterical.
Yeah, I mean, it's like no brainer, in my opinion. Again, I'm going to harp on this a little bit, but 45 encounters in the module and 40 pages. That's great. A couple things that I absolutely adore about this module. There's a dragon in it. Okay, it's in the name of the game, Dungeons and Dragons, but we don't often get dragons a lot, obviously.
And a black dragon, which is even
and
better.
A black dragon, which is better. But what's even better than all of that, it's the first encounter. It's the first encounter. You are going to encounter that dragon.
Yeah.
It's not the last encounter, and you might not ever get there, or your group might, never make it that far or whatever. But you get the dragon, and you get the dragon right out of the gate. And I love that. I love that. I can't say enough about that setup and just how brilliant that is. And if that doesn't get you into the adventure, and if that doesn't get you excited about it, just absolutely amazing. Also, the very clear references to both B1 and B2. I believe Harley even references the Borderlands in there. He kind of calls the area the Borderlands. He has the Mad Hermit. And I believe the artwork on page 8, I believe it is, it looks so similar to the artwork from B1, B2, excuse me. So I love that. The Witch Queen, a phenomenal NPC, reoccurring NPC, because she definitely, he sets it up so that she can escape. And then there was a sequel, 17.5. Yeah, look at that artwork. A little bit to the other side, overweight. No, other way. Yep, there we go. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
that is
great.
that is almost
There we go. So
exactly,
there we go.
and you can see that inspiration, and that's what the DCC modules was all about. They were inspired very heavily by those old TSR modules, to the point that when we used to work the booth at Gen Con and whatnot, people would come up and they would see DCCC number one, and they would say, "Oh, I remember playing that one 20, 30 years ago. That was a great module." And it's like, no, you didn't. This is brand new, but it
Yeah.
looks exactly like it. And to the point where I believe Joe eventually started putting that little splash up there in the little banner
Mhm.
of, this is an all new module, all new adventure. Even though it looks like something you played 30 years ago or 20 years ago when these first came out, it's not. It's brand new. So, but that's a testament to the layout, to the
Mhm.
art, the design, the maps, the writing.
Yeah.
Again, just really did it all.
Yeah.
Yes, and there's those
Great
maps
map.
again. Look
I
at
mean, look at
that.
that map.
I mean, it
Great.
looks like that could have been something exactly from the late 70s.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
I
right
love that.
there,
Worth.
and that is just, that's just an environment you want to explore. So
Mhm.
so that is ironically my number one, the same as Rick's number one. I
Nice.
was wondering if we were going to have any crossover. I actually
Yeah.
had, as my honorable mention, I actually had Area of the Pro God. So that one just barely didn't make it. So that would have been a potential other one crossover. So there we have it.
Nice. There we have it. Top
Yeah,
5.
our top five DCC modules in honor of DCC weekend online. I hope everybody's having a great time.
Yeah.
Well, we've kind of talked our heads off here for a little bit, so we are going to be back in the middle of July.
Yeah.
We're going to probably have, like I said, a TSR themed show. We're probably going to dive into the Isle of Dread a little bit. So if you're interested in that module, feel free to come back to us. Thank you, everybody, for the comments.
Mhm.
And let's share our pearl of wisdom to wrap
Yes,
the
yes.
show up.
Okay.
Yeah, do you want to go first, Rick?
Sure. And for anybody who didn't catch the first episode, Chris and I, every episode that we can, we're going to try to throw out what we're calling a pearl of wisdom, and we actually presented a literal pearl of wisdom magic item statted up for the first show, which we can provide. But well, actually, it'll be coming out, I think, in an OR product. But yeah, we're going to try to share something we've learned kind of from each show if we can. My pearl of wisdom that I present to folks, kind of based on my reflections on B1, is that sometimes just pure exploration is okay. And I would say that especially to the new dungeon masters, there's been a heavy movement to providing these really long, solid, complicated hooks to adventures. And that's not a bad thing. But I think once in a while, just having especially newer adventurers who just want to prove themselves and just hear about a weird ruin or a place where, some mythical guys used to live and maybe they're not there anymore, maybe they're not, and they want to just go and see what's there and be brave. I think that's enough for an adventure. I don't think you always need a multi-level plot hook. I think sometimes let the characters explore. That's my pearl of wisdom.
Great. And my pearl of wisdom is, and again, the kind of the dichotomy of the early design of adventures versus the modern design of adventures now is just that short amount of word count and or pages versus content on what you could get in a small. I mean, the classic example is G1, G2, G3, where each of those modules is like 8 pages long and two fully developed maps, and I think the fire giant layer was 3 maps. But just the mere fact that you could have so much content in such a small product, and actually get your message across, and
Mhm.
that's something I think that modern designers need to heed a little bit more. It's not always about big fat books. It's about what you can cram in between those pages and what you can make it useful
Mhm.
for the game master, instead of fully designing an entire wilderness. Hey, just a couple of encounters, just a little bit of a sandbox, get the game master thinking on his own.
Yeah,
That would be
inspiration.
my pearl for for
Good pearl.
for this
Yeah,
week. So all right.
inspiration.
All right. Well, we thank everybody for having breakfast with us this year. We will be back
And
this week.
folks,
We'll be back at our regular time slot in a month, and we look forward to reading your guys' chats and hearing some feedback and everything. And have a good
yeah,
one, my friend Rick. Be well.
you too, Chris. Take care, everyone. Be safe out there.
All right. Thanks a lot. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Bye.